So hello again, everybody, and welcome back for the next session. I hope everybody had the opportunity to try out some of the networking and maybe make some new contacts during the short break that we had there. And yeah, as I said, welcome back here now to the main stage for our next session, our second main session of the day. So in the last session, we looked specifically at the C-band. We're now going to move a little bit broader and look a bit wider at the mid-band ecosystem. So looking at other bands within the mid-band spectrum range. So delighted to have case studies and presentations from an excellent selection of speakers. So without further ado, I would like to now pass over to our moderator for the session, Amir Riaz from the ITU, who is going to make a brief introduction and then I think introduce our speakers. So Amir, welcome, good to see you, and over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome everyone, greetings, wherever you are. It's a good opportunity for everyone using this virtual platform that we could connect not only from the Asia Pacific region, but from all the other different regions of the world. So this is a very important session in the perspective that this mid-band is gaining huge popularity across the region, especially in Asia Pacific. There have been some implementations of this band. The reason is that it gives a good opportunity to the countries to see both the capacity and the coverage issues. And when we do this, there is an opportunity to see that there is an affordable access to the spectrum as well. But it's not on very readily available in many of the countries. There have been some legacy services that have been operating, like, for example, in 2000s, there were WiMAX was being operated in these bands, the so-called mid bands. Then even right now, the MMDS services and also some of the old microwaves are also going on in this band. In addition, we have recently also seen some indoor LTE implemented in these bands. So there is a need for refarming in some countries to make this band available. So we would see from our panel how they have seen their refarming strategies in some of the countries and the panelists. Then there's one other opportunity in this band, especially for the Southeast Asian region, in which C-band is heavily used for satellite services. So the opportunity arises in the bands like, for example, 2.3, 2.6 bands, so that operators could get at least some band for implementation of IMT services. So there is again an opportunity there, but this opportunity only arises if we have an optimal blocking and band planning of the band. It may seem that there are like 100 megahertz or 200 megahertz available in different bands, but for 5G implementation, we need to be ensure that there is a contiguous band and enough spectrum is available. So the strategies have to be adopted in the same way. The one other issue that we will also see in this session is how to be implemented. What kind of services are we saying? For example, is it possible to implement FWA, fixed wireless access, or should we use it for mobile broadband? Then the opportunity of using either TDD or FTD. All these are going to be a part of this session. Now, without further ado, I will just introduce you to the panelists. We have 4 presentations, and the panelists are from the operator, the regulator from the region Asia Pacific. Then we also are fortunate to see what's happening in the Arab region, how the refarming is done in there, what was their storyline, and we can also hear from Chris at the end. What are the findings and how the UK and overall Europe is going and implementing this ban. Having said that, we can just go to the next first speaker of this session, which is Mr. Shaidul Alam, who's the Director General of Spectrum Division from the Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Authority Commission. Mr. Shahid, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Respected moderator of this session, Mr. Amir Riaz, the distinguished other speakers, and the participants, good afternoon to all of you. Today from BTRC, I am the Director General Spectrum of Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Commission. Will be giving my presentation within next 10 minutes about the subject named 2.3 gigahertz, 2.6 gigahertz, and beyond, exploring the wider midband ecosystem in Bangladesh scenario. Now I am waiting for the slides to come in. Slide. Yes. Slide. So the next slide, within 10 minutes that I will be giving you the ecosystem of Bangladesh telecommunication system of Bangladesh. And then I will be particularly giving my presentation on the 2.3 and the bands that I have mentioned already. So in Bangladesh ecosystem telecommunication scenario,
Are you all okay, Shaidul? Can you see your slides?
I cannot see my slides.
Okay.
Can you see?
The slides should be up on your screen. The slides are up. Can you see the main screen?
I can see the main screen.
Okay, your slides are up now?
No.
Your slides should be up. You're going to bring them down and bring them up again and see if that does anything. Is that better?
No.
What we'll do, if not, I'm not sure what the issue is here. Maybe we will move to the next presentations and we'll come back to your presentation shortly. So we'll do that if that's okay. And I'm not sure what the problem is because your slides are being displayed on the screen, but we will do that and we'll come back to your presentation shortly.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know, apologies everybody for that. I'm not sure quite what the problem was there. Amir, maybe if I could pass back over to you and maybe we'll move on to the second presentation from Guanji. So if I can leave you to introduce him and we'll come back to Shahidul very shortly.
Thank you. When we solve this technical glitch, we can go to the next presenter, who is Mr. Gong Ji, who's the Chief Technical Officer of the China Mobile Research Institute. And let's hear from them how they have been able to implement 5G. As we know that China has already started implementing 5G. So let's hear from Mr. Gong Ji. Gong Ji?
Thank you, Amr. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Guan Yu from China Mobile, and today I'd like to share you what we have done and what our observations from our 5G and 4G practice in 2003 and 2006. Next page. Yeah, as you know, TDD built its competence from based on three features. The first one, of course, is a flexible configuration in the uplink and downlink resources. As you know, from a mobile internet services perspective, we can see the traffic ratio of uplink downlink to uplink is about 10:1. So with the heavy downlink resource configuration for TDD, it can adapt to this very well and make full use of the spectrum available. The second feature of TDD is the channel receptivity. As you know, TDD support both uplink and downlink in the same spectrums. It can be supported in different time slots. That means in coherent time, during the coherent time, the uplink channel impulse response could be the same for both uplink and downlink, which can help to support the advanced beamforming and also massive MIMO and achieve very high spectrum efficiency and also very high cost efficiency of the whole network deployment. And this has also been approved in 4G and 5G network deployment. The third feature of TDD is potential to have to obtain very large contiguous bandwidth. For example, in 4G we can have 20, 40. For 5G we can have 100, even more than 100 megahertz bandwidth. We can really guarantee the this operator to offer the experience, a good experience for our 5G, especially for our 5G subscribers. Since 3G era, Chinese regulator has been convinced by the industry to support the development of TDD. So it has located a lot of spectrum for TDD since 3G. For example, here 100 megahertz bandwidth in 2.3 gigahertz, and 160 megahertz in 2.6, and 300 megahertz in 3.5, and also 190 megahertz in 2.8. Next page, please. So based on this spectrum plan and allocation, Chinese operators have good practice on 4G TDD network deployment and 5G network deployment. For example, from China Mobile perspective, we have both 4G network and 5G network in 2.6 gigahertz, and we share this spectrum between 4G and 5G according to the traffic load in 4G and 5G network dynamically, which help us to make full use of the spectrum available for us and to serve our customer in the best way. And also we have, based on the TDD mode, we have introduced the mass MIMO with 64TXX and with the symbol and time slot switch off to achieve the highest energy efficiency. Next page, please. And also, as you know, since last year, China Mobile has started the launch on the TDD network. We have finished the 15,000 base station construction and support both long standard and standard mode for each base station. For this year, by Q1, we have finished 80,000 base station construction. The target for this year is 300,000 base stations construction in more than 300 cities. Next page. So from the practice of last year and this year, there's two key messages for you. The first key message is the mass MIMO is very, very important for 5G deployment. As we have done in our network deployment, we have introduced 64TXX mass MIMO in our network, which can really help us to achieve more than 10 times throughput improvement and user experience improvement, especially compared to 4G network. The second message is the large contiguous bandwidth is also very, very important to achieve a premium network, 5G network. Based on 100 megahertz in 2.6 gigahertz band, we can achieve, for each cell, we can achieve more than 5 gigabits per second for peak throughput in downlink, and the uplink is more than 600 megabits per second. And from each single user, we can see the peak data rate could be achieved more than 1.5 gigabits per second in downlink and 250 megahertz in uplink, which can help us to open the new opportunities for innovative services like AR and VR, and also high-definition video and cloud gaming, and help us to grow up our revenue in future and achieve a successful story for 5G. Next page, please. And also, if we look at the practice in China, Japan, and Korea, we can see almost all the operators have been allocated more than 100 megahertz for the 5G deployment. And also from this early deployment, you can see, and 2.6 and 2.3 to be also very popular globally, which will be the trend for future for the early 5G deployment. Besides, especially besides C-band. Next page, please. And also, thanks for the activities conducted by GTI Industry Alliance, which is focused on the TDD development. After a few years work on the ecosystems construction, we have made 2.3 and 2.6 to be matured for both 4G and 5G, which is very these two bands is very popular for 4G's deployment, and we do believe it will be also very popular for the early 5G's deployment in many countries like in China, in Japan, and also in US and also in other countries. Next page. And also, since this April, GTI has launched another plan try to promote the 5G global device. Its objective is try to collect the market requirements from different operators and develop a unified requirements on the bands supported by the global device, which including 2.3, 2.6, of course, 3.5, and 4.5. And we work together with the whole industry, try to develop the prototype of the chipset and devices. And finally, we plan to release the smartphone to support these bands by the end of this year. So that means by the end of this year, these bands could be commercial ready for the smartphone in the markets. That's all my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan Gomsi. It was very precise and summarized how you have been able to, and what are your plans for the using the midband for 5G. It's interesting to note that you have both 4G and 5G running parallelly. And what I've also noted that you have a plan of a lot of deployment, over 50,000 5G towers within a very short span of time by the end of 2020. It's a very, I would say it's a very drastic plan. I don't know how you would be able to match it, especially in this COVID situation that we are in. I also noted that you see AI and cloud gaming as one of the opportunities that the users would be able to use the 5G network that you are going to deploy. So it's again an interesting application that arising from your. Thank you for your presentation, and then we can have discussion later on as well. Now, before going to the next presenter, I just wanted to emphasize that there is a poll running as well that could help us in judging what the participants think about the different bands that are there, what they are think from their perspective, what are the best bands that are that should be made available, or that for the deployment in the 5G services or the new IMT services in these mid bands. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the issue of using these midbands are some of the services, legacy service that are already running, like MMDS or the microwave systems that are running, and refarming them is very difficult. In refarming any band from any service is always very difficult. One example and case study that we see next is the successful journey of CITC KSA, who have been able to reform this band and now have been able to make it available for IMT services. So Muhammad, please share your journey through.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. I will be talking during my presentations, during the next few slides, about our experience in Saudi Arabia and refarming midband mobile spectrum. And I will be speaking more specifically about the 2.3, 2.6 gigahertz bands, and also our experience in refarming the 3.5 gigahertz band. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will start the presentation and our story prior to 2017, where we're standing at Saudi Arabia with only 270 megahertz band available for mobile broadband services or for mobile services. And this were very low comparing to the international benchmark at that time. We were 6 megabits per second average speed, and we were ranked at 105 in speed test global ranking. So what we done during this last 2 years? Next slide, please. What we done is extensive work to paradigm shift the situation in the kingdom, to digitally transform the kingdom, to upgrade the 4G services, and to enable 5G in the kingdom through 4 spectrum auctions in only 2 years, by releasing 850 megahertz for IMT services in the kingdom, for 4G and for 5G in 5 spectrum bands: 700, 800, 1800, and also in the 2.3, 2.6. And the final band was the 3.6 gigahertz band. Right now we are standing with 1110 megahertz, which put us in a leader position, I could say, worldwide in terms of mobile broadband spectrum available for the operator. Right now we have average download speed of about 65 megabit per second, and we are ranked 10th globally in terms of mobile broadband speed in the worldwide. We are targeting to reach 100 megabit per second by the end of 2022. Next slide, please. During this journey, we've went through many challenges and I could say many challenges and many important projects during this 2 years. One of the important milestone to us was the refarming the 2.3, 2.6, and 3.5 gigahertz band. At early 2018, we started the refarming project focusing on this band. The assignment of the 2.3, 2.6, and 3.5 were fragmented, used for WiMAX application as well for other microwave-flex legacy microwave-flex connectivity in the kingdom. Our motivation was to efficiently use the spectrum to upgrade the 4G in the kingdom and to enable the coming 5G at that time, and to maximize the economic value of these very important band, which provide more than 700 megahertz band compared to each other. The challenges of using this band was technical, legal, and market challenges. We're having more than 8 licensees in the band, which includes some government and also as well as some operators to use the band for legacy applications such as WiMAX connectivity. The output of the project was comprehensive plan with many and different scenarios that contain and cover legal, technical, and economic aspects. The main allocation output of the project was to allocate the 2.3 up to 2.4 megahertz band, which is band 40, to with TDD arrangement for 4G services in the kingdom, to allocate as well the 2.6 gigahertz with the TDD arrangement to provide 4G and 5G, and finally to allocate the 3.4 up to 3.8 gigahertz band to provide 5G connectivity in the kingdom. Next slide, please. One of the, I could say, main important decision we took with the project was the 2.6 gigahertz band. We chose, as I mentioned in the previous slide, to adopt the band 41 for TDD arrangement. Why? I mean, as you all know that worldwide and internationally there is 2 main ecosystem in the band, which is using the band for FDD, as well as there is some ecosystem for TDD band. We choose the TDD because it enabled the 4G, as you saw in the right part of the picture. There is also I could say, mature ecosystem in terms of LTE network across the band 41, and as well as there is a good LTE handset penetration, and also to enable the 5G, which was coming at that time, and 2.6 gigahertz band was one of the important band to enable or to be used for 5G as a candidate band at that time, with also the highest spectrum efficiency and higher order massive multiple input, multiple output order to use the antennas. There is very important challenge in using TDD arrangement, which is the harmonization with neighboring countries. What CITC has done is we started the coordination with our GCC neighboring countries in order to limit any new networks and within GCC to be within the TDD arrangement because of the reasons I mentioned, and we've succeeded to reach, I could say, initial agreement with our neighboring countries for all future networks in the 2.6 gigahertz band. And also we are working right now in developing a synchronization agreement in order to maximize the spectral efficiency and minimize any cross-border interference between our neighboring countries. Next slide, please. So the two figure shows here the situation in Saudi Arabia before and after. Right now, we have very continuous, large plugs comparing with the previous situation. We have 100 megahertz assignments for the operators, which provide 5 continuous LTE channels, which provides 4G as well as 5G in the 2.6 gigahertz band. Right now, after less than 2 years of enabling or of providing those spectrum, we are standing with more than 50% of utilization in less than 2 years. Next year, we expect to have 50 megabit per second speed across each and different region in the kingdom, which is linked by obligation for the license of these spectrum bands. Next slide, please. Same thing was done for the 3.6 gigahertz band. The band was assigned in Saudi Arabia for WiMAX connectivity. Right now, we are standing with 100 megahertz continuous blocks to provide 5G services in the kingdom. We are standing right now with more than 7,000 5G sites, and we expect the band to be used for providing 5G with coverage more than 50% in the main cities within the coming short years. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's the key lesson learned from the refarming project? I mean, spectrum is a scarce resource. Regulators should consider always and should be proactive while refarming all legacy spectrum bands in order to ensure the spectrum efficiency of this very, very valuable resource and to maximize the economic and social values. However, it is very important thing operators should be thinking, regulators should be thinking and should be done while thinking about and planning of refarming, which is cost-benefit analysis and impact assessment in order to address the need of different stakeholders and to cover all aspects such as legal, technical, and market and economic perspectives. Next slide, please. So what's next in Saudi Arabia? At the beginning of this year, Saudi Arabia has launched its national spectrum strategy, which inspire and to unlock the potential of telecommunication services in the kingdom to be smarter and future. The aim of this strategy is to transform Saudi Arabia into digital society, to enable industries and services across different sectors. We target to enable and plan to enable 10 gigahertz spectrum, bandwidth of 10 gigahertz spectrum to be available in the market over the next 4 years. The public consultation is available, and since last week, all comments, and we target all comments and input from all different stakeholders in international wireless society, and we are welcoming any comments and input from participants in the forum for our consultation. Thank you so much for hearing and sorry for being late. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Very interesting case study, and I think it's a very ambitious plan that you have of having 10 gigahertz released in the next 4 years. But I think you would be successful of looking into what you have achieved in the past 2 years. 850 megahertz refarmed. It's a very nice case study, and I think there are many lessons are there to be learned. So I also noted that you were also very efficient on the cross-border issues and synchronization. It was well achieved. So congratulations on that as well. And surely, as you have shared the public consultation that is on its way, and we will receive now many comments, as you have mentioned in this gathering of many participants from all over. Thank you for your presentation. So now we have the next speaker with us. Again, it would be Mr. Chris, who's the Director of International Spectrum Policy from Ofcom. He would be giving us some insights on how this midband is being or planned in UK in particular, and in general in Europe. Chris?
Thank you very much, Amir. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening. And what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about what we're doing in terms of meeting the needs for spectrum, particularly mid-band spectrum in the UK. So if we go to the next slide. Like other countries, I mean, Ofcom in the UK is aiming to make spectrum available to meet the increasing and varied demand from different types of spectrum user. And like others, we are making spectrum available across the whole frequency range, in the low, in the mid, and in the high frequencies. And many of the bands that are mentioned there on this chart will be familiar to many of you, I'm sure. We're focusing here on the mid-band. So if we go to the next slide, what we've identified in the UK and indeed in Europe is that C-band 3.4 to 3.8 is going to be a key band for 5G in Europe. I mean, it's essentially the core band for 5G, we believe. So in the UK, we've already made around about 270 megahertz of C-band available, and that's from an award that took place a couple of years ago, plus some legacy holdings. And we've recently, actually earlier this week, published our proposals to auction the remainder of that band. That's the remaining 120 megahertz of spectrum. And that will be a combined award with the 700 megahertz band. And that will be through national licenses, which will be available for mobile broadband. So that will then see all of the, or practically all of that 3.4 to 3.8 spectrum available for presumably for mobile broadband, most likely use case in the UK. Now, that's probably reasonably familiar to many of you, and I think that's a fairly common approach across Europe. Many European countries are making around about that 400 megahertz of 3.4 to 3.8 available for mobile broadband. In some countries, there may be some slight variations in Europe, but generally that C-band is going to be core. If we go to the next slide, what I wanted to do is just focus on a couple of other areas which I think may be of interest. So I mentioned at the beginning that one of the things that we want to do in the UK and from Ofcom's perspective is to ensure that we're making spectrum available to meet the various use cases, the diverse range of potential usages of spectrum. And one way we're doing that is also to look at making spectrum available on a shared basis, making it available for local areas. So this could be for things like industry verticals, potentially for campuses, or for people that want to provide coverage over a small local area. They're not interested in a national license. And we've therefore made proposals in a range of bands. We made a number of bands available for these shared access licenses. One of those bands being the 3.8 to 4.2 gigahertz band. So anyone that's interested can come to Ofcom and essentially apply for a license which is relatively inexpensive. It covers a small local area, generally low power, and we will issue that on a first come, first served basis. As I say, for anyone that's interested in providing some sort of connectivity over that small area, whether it's for an industry vertical or whatever. Another initiative that we've looked at is access to spectrum held by the mobile operators. Now, the mobile operators in the UK are issued with national licenses, but that doesn't mean that they're using each of the frequency bands that they're licensed for across every geographic area of the UK. Particularly in some of the higher frequency bands that they hold, they might not actually use it over quite large chunks of the UK. Now, we have had some interest, particularly from local community areas that are interested in improving coverage, saying, well, if that spectrum isn't being used by the mobile operator, could they use it? It's actually quite difficult for those communities to work with the mobile operators, because that's not the sort of the business that the mobile operators are in.
So within Ofcom, we've basically said, well, come to us, and if you want, we will act as an intermediary and try and work with the mobile operators to see if there's any scope to reuse some of that spectrum that the mobile operators themselves aren't planning to use, because generally it's spectrum in sort of rural areas, that, you know, the less attractive areas where they probably wouldn't have that much intention, or they might not have intention to roll out. So that's really just some of the ideas that we're looking at in the UK to try and promote efficient use of spectrum, thinking about how we can best use it, but also ensure that we are enabling innovative new uses of spectrum. We're enabling anyone that's got some ideas about how they might want to use spectrum. We're enabling them to have access and to look at the different types of ways that spectrum could be made available to meet those needs. The final thing I wanted to talk about, if we could go to the next slide, is in relation to the 6 gigahertz band. And I think this has been a focus of a lot of attention in the UK over the past year or so, and indeed a lot of a focus of attention across Europe. And just a couple of weeks ago, actually, Ofcom published a statement confirming that we were making the 5925 to 6425 megahertz bands, that's the lower part of the 6 gigahertz band, 500 megahertz of spectrum, available in the UK for Wi-Fi and other wireless related technologies. And that's on a license exempt basis, and it's for indoor and very low power outdoor use. And in doing that, we have emphasized that actually, particularly when it comes to things like Wi-Fi, we do believe global harmonization is very important. Indeed, actually within Europe, there is a huge amount of interest as well in this band. CEPT is undertaking work on the same band that's mentioned here, that 5925 to 6425, and indeed has got proposals to also make that band available for Wi-Fi or for wireless access systems and RLANs on a very similar basis, and that's actually subject to consultation at the moment, and we will be addressing that further in the autumn as part of the CPT process. So there's definitely interest in relation to that band in Europe, and as I say, in the UK, we've already now made it available for Wi-Fi. And one of the things that we emphasized when we were doing that was that we wanted to try and do it in a way that was as straightforward and simple as possible. So we've looked for a simple regime to just make that 500 megahertz of spectrum available for Wi-Fi. The other part of the 6 gigahertz band, if we go on to the next slide, is an area of also increasing interest. Now, yesterday, actually, we talked about the WRC, and we noted the upcoming agenda item under agenda item 1.2 in relation to this band. And it's clear that this is being considered in Region 1 for IMT as part of that WRC preparatory process. However, it's worth noting that Europe didn't support that future agenda item going into WRC 19. And also within Europe, I mean, we are very aware of the need to protect incumbent services that are operating in that band. So I think all I'll say by way of conclusion in relation to this band is that it's very clear that, you know, there is the WRC process, but there is also, we are very aware of increasing interest from a number of countries, particularly outside of Europe, in terms of looking at this band for wireless access systems and RLANs. We're noting developments in US, Brazil, South Korea. So I think there's going to be a lot of continued interest in relation to this upper 6 gigahertz band over the coming months, and how we actually make that available is going to be quite a contentious and interesting area to watch. I will stop there in terms of just highlighting where we are in the UK at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you for sharing and interesting, sharing initiatives. For example, you had told us that you are going to have the option of both 700 and combined with 3.6 gigahertz very soon. And then some very interesting initiative for which I think there would be a lot of questions coming, like local access for verticals in 3.6 gigahertz band and reuse of the bands allocated to the operators for local communities. I think this is very relevant in some of the countries in Asia Pacific as well, which have large geography and population very diversified. for example, like Australia and Mongolia. So this approach could also be useful for them if they could do it. Then some initiatives around 6 gigahertz, the Wi-Fi band for indoor and outdoor use. That is also interesting, the technical characteristics. So now I will try to check with Dan if we have the technical issues resolved for Mr. Shaidul. Then I will give the floor to him. Okay,
Yes.
Shaidul, please, floor is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for giving me the floor again. Like the previous speakers, you will be also highlighting the present ecosystem of my country and how this present ecosystem is developed for mobile communication. And also, I will be highlighting about the 2.3, 2.6, and what we are thinking about 5G communication or 5G services or 5G services in my country. So you can go for the second slide. The telecommunication system in Bangladesh, it is developed rapidly in terms of coverage, variety, and quality. The socio-economic impact of communication services are evident, and the people using technologies for business and personal communication, even in the deep rural areas. Next slide, please. The strategic of this telecommunication in Bangladesh, the government is quite sensitive to people's aspirations and adopts a customer-sensitive policy for providing quality service at affordable prices. And Bangladesh has successfully brought the appropriate technologies to its people at reasonable prices. Next, please. And the spectrum is assigned in Bangladesh, the milestones and how it is assigned. We have started in 1993 with the CDMA, and then 1996 with the GSM 2G, and subsequently we have given the more spectrum as the market has developed. So the requirement of spectrum was more, and it was given. And in 2011, the spectrum was renewed for the 2G operators. At that time, we have 4 operators. And now 2013, we have introduced 3G, and throughout the whole country now 3G services are available, and we are having around more than 160 million subscribers in my country. And again, in 2018, we have provided spectrum for the 4G services. To mention here that 4G services are not covered in the whole country. So it is covered most of the country, most of the area of my country, but not the whole country. So the operators, they are rolling out, and also we are encouraging our local manufacturer, mobile set manufacturer, to manufacture smartphones so that it can be affordable for our rural customers. Next, please. So how we assign spectrum? From 1993 to 2005, we have assigned spectrum without any cost. And then from 2005 to onward up to 2008, we have given spectrum with acquisition prices, but that prices was settled by bilateral negotiation. And from 2013, we have gone for auction. And also in 2018, the auction was carried out for giving spectrum to the existing operators. Now, beside these spectrum prices, we have also have annual charges for using of the spectrum. It depends on the frequency changes, charges, power output charges, radio station and terminal charges, and also yearly license fee. They give it to the government. And next, please. We have by this time 4 mobile operators. The leader in the market is the Grameenphone GP. He is having 37 megahertz and having the subscriber around 74 million. The next one is the Robi Exiata Limited. They have having spectrum around 36.4 megahertz and having the subscriber up to 47 million. Then the Bangla Link, this is the third in terms of, I'm telling in terms of subscribers, and they have around 30.6 megahertz spectrum, and the user around 34 million. Now the last one is the government-owned organization Teletalk. They are having the more sufficient spectrum to cover their network and also provide service to the customers, but their number of customers are not that significant. It is around 4 million. So up to this, what I have told you, I have given you the scenario how the telecommunication system in Bangladesh is developed and what is the present ecosystem. So far, we have given spectrum up to 21 megahertz, 2100 megahertz, 900, 1800, and 2100. And then now we are planning for next spectrum. Please go to the next slide. It is 2.3 gigahertz. And 2.3 gigahertz, you can see that it is assigned is 35%. It is assigned to a broadband operator. He is Ogori, but they are not that significant in operation. And we are having 65% is unused. So we can assign that one around 35 and 35, total 60 megahertz. And if that spectrum is also reformed from the broadband operator, that spectrum will be also available to us. The next one is 2.6. It is much talked in my country, and around 55% is assigned to the operators. This is the government user, the ISPs, metro railway system, and broadband access operator. And we are having around 85 megahertz in two block, as you can see. And we can also reform some of the spectrum from the ISPs and also from BW operators, which may be possible at the end of this 2021 or mid of 2021. Next, please. Now, the 3.5 gigahertz present status, if you can see that it is assigned and unassigned, the windows are very clumsy, so it is not continuous. So this is assigned to Bangladesh. Some of the assignment is given to Bangladesh Police, that is the law enforcing agency of my country, and they are having a huge network throughout the country. Based on this network, they are doing their operational and administrative activities. And we have the 13 ISPs, they are using that spectrum. Before 2 years, we have given them the request that they should change their or they should migrate their customers from wireless to wire. Most of them have done it. We gave them time to June 2020, and some of them have requested us to extend the time. We have given the time up to September this year, and probably by September, everything they will be shifting their customers from wireless to wire, or they may have a separate chunk of spectrum in a higher band. At the end of this year, the situation that will be prevailing in my country, you can see in the next slide. This is will be the situation that is the only 30 megahertz will be assigned, as it is assigned to Bangladesh Police Law Enforcement Agency, as already I have mentioned, and we will have around 70 megahertz and also 300 megahertz continuous. With that, we are planning. So if I go to the next slide, you can see the summary of the midband that is prevailing in my country. 2300, as I have told, 35 and 30 is unassigned, and 2.6 it is 45 and 40 is unassigned, and also in 3.5 what we will be having at the end of this year, it is 70 megahertz and 300 megahertz. So please go to the next slide. And the other bands, that is 2.5 5.4 5.2 5.8, this is the for mobile user, that is public mobile user, and also ISPs. And at the upper band, 6 gigahertz, 27 gigahertz, up to that one, 37 gigahertz, 60 gigahertz, and upward, we are having the microwave links of the mobile operators and also ISP operators. Go to the please next slide. We will be talking about the C-band, and the C-band completely is by our one of the satellite, the one satellite. We are the 57th country in this world to have one satellite, and that is our Bangabandhu Satellite 1. They are using that band, and also they are having the transponder in the KU band in the next slide. So they are also using that. Bangabandhu Satellite is using that spectrum. Now, what will be the spectrum of 5G that we are planning to have in my country? It is in the next slide. So if you can see the next slide, in 2.6 we are planning to have 5G in 40 megahertz and 40 megahertz 2 block, and in 3.5 we are planning to have 70 megahertz, maybe one of the government licenses, and 300 megahertz, it will be given for the public mobile operators. And how it will be distributed, actually we will be discussing this one with our stakeholders, and then we will be deciding how it will be done. And we are planning to have this one in TDDA. So the guideline will be prepared, and already it is prepared, and you can see the plan that what will be the our roadmap for 5G in the next slide. So draft is more or less complete. At the end of this quarter, we will be finalizing the draft guideline, which is prepared by a committee, and that will be given for the public opinion, in which the public and the stakeholders, the operators, they can give their opinion, and after scrutinizing their opinion, which is required and which is applicable or which is acceptable, and then we will be giving it to our ministry for approval. They will also go for public hearing and a public consultation of this guideline, and they will approve that one. And we are we are having the estimated time at the end of this year, the guideline may be approved by the ministry. And initially, the first quarter of 2021, we will be inviting proposal for assignment of the spectrum. It may be the existing operators, also maybe the new operators. And the end of the first quarter, in the second quarter, we are planning to launch 5G. And you know that in 2021 we will have our 50th independence, and we are planning in this year to launch 5G. And the rollout, initially you can see in the next slide, the rollout initially it will be going for the build up areas, like the divisional headquarters. Within 12 months we are having 9 divisional headquarters at present, so we are planning for these divisional headquarters initially for 1 year, and then we will go for the 50% of the district headquarters. By 22-23 it will be 20, and then rest of the district headquarters, more 50% district headquarters will be covered by next 36 months, and then onward we'll be going for the national highways and the railways and the important places. So this is our plan, and definitely that plan will depend on the COVID situation. And if it is hope to that the COVID situation will be overcome by the world, and we will be going for implementing this our proposal. So this is the overall plan. So I have given you the idea how the ecosystem is developed. It is now up to 2100 megahertz, and then we are planning the next year to have 5G and with 22.6 and 3.5 megahertz band. And with that, next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shaidul Alam. Very detailed presentation on the plans, and it's very interesting to see that you have planned a lot on how the rollout is going to go on, and where would be the opportunities. And we all know that Bangladesh is a very key market for mobile services, with the high population penetration in some geographical areas. So it would be interesting to see how you go about it. Thank you for sharing the details. And now we think we can go to the discussion session in journal, and I invite the participants to also, if you have any questions around. We have already received some questions, but if there are some others that are specific, please mention the name to which speaker you are addressing the question. Let me start the discussion around some of the key technical issues, and then we will go towards the licensing issue. We all have seen that there is in compared to 700 and 900 band, there is a lot more spectrum is available in 2.3, 2.6, or the other mid bands. But for 5G, I think we cannot go with the same band planning and locking of the blocks as we have done for, like, say, 2G or 3G or even 4G services. So there was one mention in the presentation from Mr. Guanyi that the spectrum, for example, for 2.3, it can hold only one operator, and 2.6, it would be given to two operators. So I want to listen to your other opinions. Do you think that this could be a good approach, or how it should be the band planning?
Actually, I think just I have shown in my presentation, from our side, our experiences is large contiguous bandwidth allocation from the regulator is very, very important for the 5G deployment, because only when we can have this, we can really make 5G is much better than 4G. Then we can just ensure the operator.
I think we are losing the voice, maybe. So any other speaker wants to say something on this issue on the band planning, maybe from the regulatory side? How do you see the planning? You are planning, you are going to give all the operators the same chance to go for a one band, or are you going to maybe distribute it if it's between 2.1, 2.3? Yeah, great.
Yep. So it's an interesting question, and I'm sure there are differences between 3G, 4G, 5G in terms of how operators would want their spectrum configured. I would say, though, from a regulatory perspective, I mean, certainly from Ofcom's perspective, the aim remains to get spectrum out there in a way that is as useful as possible. And I think what we wouldn't want to do is to try and tell the industry how it best should configure its spectrum bands. So you hear this thing about, 80 to 100 megahertz contiguous blocks. I mean, it's actually up to, as long as we're making the spectrum available in blocks that can be configured in the way that the industry finds most useful. I think that is our aim, if you like, from Ofcom's perspective. So we tend to make blocks available in smaller chunks, and then it's up to the industry how it wants to build those together, and how it wants to use those. And obviously those blocks of spectrum are tradable as well. So if they want to swap blocks between themselves, they're able to do so. But I think it becomes slightly difficult if the regulator is overly prescriptive in terms of saying, well, we think this is the best way that you should manage your spectrum holdings.
I saw Muhammad, he wants to say a little bit on this.
Yes. Actually, I agree with my colleague from Ofcom about we should make everything available for the operator. However, I mean, especially when we talk about mid-band spectrum, if we talk about 2.6 and 2.3, we talk about something around 300 megahertz for mobile services. Right now, we have mature 4G services or mature 4G ecosystem worldwide. However, we are heading to 5G. And 5G, as you mentioned, Mr. Emir, in the beginning, it needs very large chunk of spectrum. I believe regulators should consider market perspective about making everything available. However, also regulator should think about the future, about 5G, about enabling a large chunk of spectrum. For example, in Saudi Arabia, we had a market with 3 mobile operators, and we had 290 megahertz available. The best outcome. I mean, we didn't engineer the outcome, but we've resulted with the best available outcome to provide 190 bandwidth for each operator. Right now, operator can provide good 4G. Also, when the 5G become mature in 2.3 and to become more mature, let's say, in 2.3 and 2.6, we'll be having the good availability to provide 5G services in the kingdom, and we'll not be thinking about any, I could say, refarming or thinking about the education of the band or something like that in 5G. So the CITC think in refarming or in making any spectrum available mid-band right now is to think ahead about 5G, to think ahead about, not to think only about the current mature 4G applications. Next one.
Yeah. In the beginning, we touched. Yeah, sure, Mr. Wangi.
Yeah, sorry, just to have some problem on the internet.
Yeah,
I fully agree with Mohammed's view, because from the industry perspective and also from the operator perspective, the large contiguous bandwidth allocation is very, very important to guarantee the very good experience for 5G network, and also very important to to improve the cost efficiency of the network deployment from operator perspective. So personally, from my perspective, I suggest around 100 megahertz bandwidth allocation for each band per operator is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there are got opinions that came out, and let's go to the other point that was, I think, mentioned in one of the presentation from BTRC. One trend that we saw from about giving access to the different bands to the mobile services. The trend was that increasing cost per megahertz over the years. Now, when you have a plan for 5G implemented starting from 2021, or I guess, do you see the same trend, or are you planning the same? And this is again a question in the chat as well, coming from GSMA. You can also understand where they're coming from. Do you see the same trend going? Because then the affordability and the issues would come up. Maybe you are muted, Mr. Shaidul.
Thank you very much for this question. It is a common question to me. So the price is more and it is increasing. You see, initially for 10 years, more than 10 years, we have given free of cost. And then it was 10 years, it is on negotiation with the operator. And we have had the auction only in 2011 and 2012. So because of the price or because of rollout giving service by more good network and more giving emphasis on the equipment of the network, we have taken less spectrum. And definitely, as I have given the plan, initial plan, then 2.6, which is 40 and 45 two blocks, and in 2.5, it is 4 blocks. One is 70, and another is 300 with 100, 100, and 100 blocks. Even we are having more frequency. The committee is formed at the national level. So in the committee, I am also a member. So definitely, the price will depend on the overall technology, as they will be taking more spectrum, and I am sure the price will not be like earlier. Definitely, it will be less for the 5G, and how much less it will be decided by the committee, and they will suggest to the PTRC, and we will go for public hearing, and then we will decide. But I can give you some assurance that it will be 100 megahertz spectrum. So 100 megahertz spectrum price cannot be too much. And if it is too much, then it will not be possible to give service of 5G to the nation.
Thank you. It's very good news. And I think just to add to this, another question from Intelsat, they wanted to know that what could be the procedure in which they could also contribute on this public consultation from BTRC. Is there a formal process, or if you can elaborate a little how they can, from Intelsat?
Okay. First of all, in this committee, the representative from the mobile operators, they are also included. So they are coming to us on a meeting. They are giving their opinion. It is direct once drafting the policy. Once we draft the policy, in my presentation also I have mentioned that it is from the committee, from the BTRC regulator, it will be going to the public and to the operators and all stakeholders through our website. So we'll be giving around 15 or 1 month's time to give anybody, any individual or any industry, anybody can give comments on any particular directive or any particular clause. And we will study that clause, which was is applicable to us, or it is according to our policy and national strategy. And then we incorporate that one. If we cannot incorporate that one, then we will give a notification to the individual that it is not possible for this one. So it will be first case. Then again, it will be going to our Ministry of Post and Telecommunications. And then they will also go for consultation. They will also discuss with the committee member, with PTRC and other stakeholders, especially those which could not be resolved. And if it can be improved, and after improvement, it will be going, finally it will be. So anybody can take part in this, giving their opinion.
Okay, thank you. Before going to the next question, I just wanted to update everyone that we had a poll running, the question was that alongside the C-band, what other bands do you think offer the best option to deliver mid-band spectrum for 4G and 5G in Asia Pacific countries? And the most of the participants, they think that 2.6 gigahertz is the band, and following that it's 2.3 gigahertz and the 3.4 to 3.6 gigahertz. Anyone wants to say something? Do you agree to this, or do you have other opinion? The most is 2.6 gigahertz, then followed by 2.3, and then 3.4 and 3.6. Any opinion? Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Shaidul?
Yes, they are right, but it will depends on the availability of the spectrum. As you have also told in your introduction, the refarming is very difficult. And 2.6, we have 40 and 45. Another spectrum is assigned to the operator. So once we will be able to refarm those spectrum, then those who will be taking the initial spectrum, they can be given priority to go give those spectrum on CPC. As it is not possible at this moment to refarm in my country, so we are giving preference to 3.6.
Thank you. About the refarming, Muhammad, we received a lot of praises on the what you have achieved in the at least in the past 2 years. The refarming, everyone understands that it's a very difficult job, and especially you have also coordinated approach. So, for example, there have been comments from Inmarsad Bashir, who said that how the countries and regulators in Asia Pacific can learn from you, and what could be the opportunities that they could follow the same path. Similarly, there is a comment or question from Huawei. They want to get a little more information on how you have been able to refarm the spectrum from WiMAX operators. Have you compensated them, or?
Okay, so first question. Actually, I believe when any country or any administration plan to reform any spectrum band, I could say they should put all different scenarios, even the difficult non-visible scenarios should be put on the table. For example, in our case, in 2.6 and 3.5 gigahertz band, we are having some available chunk of spectrum adjacent to the used spectrum for WiMAX. However, at that time, we thought about, as I mentioned in my presentation, enhancing the 4G services and enabling 5G in the connectivity. After that, the most important thing is doing cost-benefit analysis that cover legal situation, which cover the situation of each and different licensees, duration of each license, the possibility of invoking the license, all these perspectives. Second thing is to study technical situation and the current deployment, I could say, for each and every services. Sometimes we found that we had some kingdom-wide assignments where the deployment was very limited, for example, in 1 or 2 and 3 cities. So for thinking ahead, you can accommodate the current legacy use, for example, for certain years. However, your plan and your license should cover all technical, I could say, future technologies that you need to provide. So yes, it is very difficult. Yes, it needs a lot of coordination with government entities, with operators. You have to consider maybe financial compensations with the operators according to their current deployment. But the key word, I believe, is you have to think big. You have to think about the economic value of this spectrum, how this will affect your country. I mean, you can see what we did is, as I mentioned, the paradigm shift. We changed everything in 2.6, 3.5, but the result, it was very difficult. However, the results, you can see it 6 folds right now of enhancing internet speeds in only 2 or 3 years. It's very big. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Maybe one question to Chris. Something about you mentioned some of the initiatives and also of the Wi-Fi bands in 6 gigahertz and the higher 6 gigahertz. Can you elaborate a little on the licensing part? Is it class licensing that you are going to do, or what kind of licensing that you have in mind?
So in the 6 gigahertz band, it will be license exempt.
Okay.
So that would mean that there'll be no licensing framework, and the devices will be exempt from licensing under a statutory instrument. So that's like Wi-Fi type devices. I just wanted to come back, actually. I think Mohammed made some very valid points just then about sort of thinking big and thinking strategically. And I think one of the things I would sort of take away from this is that I think we're all facing some very similar issues in terms of increasing demand for spectrum, an ever increasing range of different types of user that want to access spectrum. But I'm not sure there's ever a single solution that's going to sort of be applicable across all the different countries, because we've all got different issues that we need to deal with. And I think the important thing is to just think about that in a strategic way. And one of the points I did want to make is that I think, particularly as we go towards some of the higher frequency bands, there's opportunities to sort of think a bit differently from what we may have done in the past, and actually to think, a little bit more creatively. And sometimes that may be sort of refarming projects, or sometimes it might be thinking about how that spectrum can be shared with incumbent users. And certainly in those higher frequency bands, there is opportunities for spectrum sharing that wasn't there in the past, or indeed when it gets to 6 gigahertz, going for license exempt frameworks and things. So I think there's different models that are likely to be applicable. And the important thing is just to consider all of those. And just finally, then going back to the spectrum bands, I mean, I think for me, it wasn't a surprise that 2.6 came out on top. I mean, I think that's quite a global band for mobile broadband. But what I thought was interesting was that there were quite a wide range of views about the next best band, if you like, and there was lots of different options that were being considered in different countries. And I think that's something we might just have to accept going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, you are right. Maybe it's due to geography as well. Here in the Asia Pacific, we have some countries that are heavily dependent on the C-band for the satellite as well, because of the nature of disasters and typhoons that come in the Pacific and the eastern side of the Asia. But the others that are high-end, the countries with developed economies, they want to use it for the same 3.5 or 3.6 gigahertz band for mobile services. So there's a kind of a split even within Asia Pacific due to its geographical location and the requirement. Just one more point that I want to deliberate a little is maybe you can mention here. We see in the Asia Pacific a lot of issues of cross-border interferences. Do you see the same going forward if we use for the 5G even in those higher bands? And how do you think that a solution could be there?
The neighboring interference?
Yes, cross-border, cross countries.
From this perspective, I think it's one way to make full use of the spectrum is I think it's synchronized, because from my perspective, from the mobile internet service perspective, I think the traffic ratio between downlink and uplink is similar for different countries. So it's the base for the different countries to have the same configuration for such kind of uplink downlink configuration. And also this one has been practiced in China, for example. I think it's similar for even for different operators. It's similar. So we have done it in 4G deployment into the 6 when we have several operators together to share to have to the 6 deployment. We, from the regulator perspective, the synchronized way is dominated by, is mandated by the regulator. Then it's very easy for us to solve this problem. But for the neighboring countries, of course, we need the coordination from the different regulators. That's what will be the simple way to solve the problem. Otherwise, it will be quite complicated.
Thank you. I think that our time is up. Thank you for contributing, and I think it has been a very good discussion. Thank you for sharing the case studies, Mohammed. We have heard a lot in the chat about the successful story that Software has been over the years, and thank you for sharing, Mr. Shaidul, your plans of a BTRC for the next 4 or 5 years in the long and term. And Chris, thank you for sharing some very interesting initiatives that that I think would be thought-provoking for some of the countries in the Asia Pacific as well. So overall,
Well, if there's a good time for somebody to cut out, there ever is a good time for audio to cut out. I guess it's now because it's right at the end. So Amir, we lost your last couple of words there, but I was just saying if ever there was a good time for an audio to go, it was then. But I think we got pretty much everything of what you were saying at the very end. So
you could share.
But yeah, I think we caught everything of what you were going to say anyway. So I think I'd like to just echo what you said, Amir. Say thank you very much to all of our panelists. Amir, to you as well. Thank you very much for expertly moderating the session too. I think it was very well moderated, so thank you for that as well. And thank you to all of you out there for your questions and your comments as well. So I know that it was once again very busy on the chat room. So thank you very much, and we got round to answering quite a few of those questions, which is great. So so brilliant. Okay, so that's it for the plenary sessions for today, but we do now have, actually it's not, we have another one later, so it's not it for the plenary session, so it's it for the ones for now. So we're now moving on to our showcase session. So we have the 3 showcase sessions now taking place. So they'll be running parallel, so you need to look in the stages tab where you are now. You're currently on the main stage, but you will also see a showcase stage 1, showcase stage 2, and showcase stage 3, and you can choose which of those you now want to participate at. So on showcase stage 1, we have a session which is being hosted by Etsy, which is looking at microwave and millimeter wave spectrum for 5G wireless backhaul. On showcase stage 2, we have a session hosted by Huawei, which is entitled 5G is on, and looking at some demonstrations of 5G technology and things in action there. And then on showcase stage 3, we have a session hosted by Access Partnership, focusing on modernizing spectrum and telecommunications management. So you have a choice now of which of those sessions that you want to attend. So please do make your way over to those. And we are then back here for the second of our after hours sessions. So at 7:25 Jakarta time, we are back here on the main stage for the last session of the day. And that's going to be looking at meeting connectivity requirements of vertical industries. We've actually looked and talked a little bit about that during some of the sessions today, but we have a session specifically focusing on meeting connectivity requirements of vertical industries back here at 7:25 today. But for now, once again, thank you so much to Amir and to all of our panelists for this session. Thank you as well to our earlier speakers and panelists, and looking forward to seeing you over in one of the showcase sessions very shortly, and they'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. Thank you very much.